My name is Jeffrey Fenster. I'm Senior Vice President of A&R at Jive Records, and I've been in the music business for about 25 years in various capacities, both as a music lawyer, business affairs person, and for the last 16 years as an A&R person. A&R is a term that I think derived as long ago as the 50s, early 60s, and it stood for artist and repertoire. And it came about because the people who were the talent scouts, which is basically what A&R is at its essence, the people who were the talent scouts at that time were not just finding the artists that the record companies were signing, but were also finding them songs. The concept of the artist writing their own material and that being important is a relatively recent phenomenon. At one time, whether it was Elvis or Frank Sinatra or whoever, that most artists did songs that were written by other people. So the person who was the talent scout was also finding the repertoire, i.e. the songs for the records. But the A&R people are the ones who are like, scouts for a baseball team or, anybody that goes out to find talent. There are, throughout really, in fact, all genres, there are artists that, don't necessarily write all their own material. Certainly much more so in an obvious way in the pop area, in the pop arena. You still have plenty of artists who either don't write or, maybe make a limited contribution to their material, but, rely a lot upon outside writers and writer-producers for their material. Take the American Idol winners as an example of that, who, for the most part don't write that much. In other genres, in rock, it's much more common, obviously, for artists to write their own material, and yet it's not by any means, the rule 100% of the time. Very often producers are involved in the writing of the records, or even outside writers. One of the big Good Charlotte hits, co-written by their good friend John Feldman, who's the writer and producer, and also was an artist, was the guy in Goldfinger. So R&B, very often outside writers. Hip-hop, kind of like rock, it's much more common for the artist to write their own lyrics, but certainly for the most part, they don't write the music part. And in some cases, don't even write their own lyrics. So it's still very common, although I think a lot of people think now that for you to be really a true artist, for some reason, you have to write your own material. A big part of the job of an A&R person is, finding the right producer for an artist, to make their records. And in some cases, that's, a producer who, in the classic sense of Steve Lillywhite with U2, or a Daniel Lanois, maybe brings a lot to the table, but is still ultimately someone who takes a band and puts them in the studio and records the parts. But as an A&R person, a lot of times finding the producer may in fact be a writer, or you need to find multiple producers for a single project. Again, that every artist is different, and part of the A&R person's job is meeting the particular needs of that artist. Multiple producers on a single project is very common in the in the pop arena, in the R&B arena, and in the hip hop arena. And arguably, you could say it tends to make for less cohesive, projects and albums as a whole. But I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that people are looking for hits and hit singles, and you think by going to, a number of different people, they'll maybe hit on somebody that brings that to the table. In some cases, it's very conscious desire to bring different kind of flavors and different styles to a particular record. But I think, again, except in the rock world, it's probably more the exception, more the rule than the exception to have multiple producers on a record. Certainly, and in every place I've been, A&R people look to sign artists. And obviously, if you find an artist and bring them in and sign them, then, you are the person in charge of that project. Sometimes if you're a junior person, there'll be someone more senior kind of supervising or helping out. But they're also very often the case that, people leave, things change. So certainly here, there are a number of projects which, maybe predate, the particular A&R personnel. It's fairly common for an artist to have their A&R person leave at some point during their career. And so at that point, it's a decision that's usually made. Here there's no person that's 100% like the head of A&R. Peter Thea is the head of A&R, but I think together with Barry Weiss, who's the president of the company, and kind of the A&R staff, when there's an artist that doesn't have an A&R person for whatever reason, it's kind of a joint discussion and decision. Who has the passion for this artist? Who understands this artist, and then kind of make a decision on who's going to be the point person to deal with that particular artist. I think it's much more likely for you to have a passion for the artist if it's something you like. You know what I mean? If it's within your taste. I think sometimes people get assigned artists, or maybe even find and sign artists that aren't necessarily something that they would naturally gravitate towards, or that is necessarily in the sweet spot of most of the music they listen to. Sometimes and sometimes it's simply a matter of you hear something and it's great, and even though it's outside of your comfort zone, that's one of the exciting things about it, because it is a little different than what you would normally do. And so it's a discovery and a challenge. And I think sometimes people are assigned things, again, that are not within their normal range, because maybe you can bring a fresh perspective to it. So, to me, part of the overall view, my overall view of this, is that we're dealing in a creative business. So the rule is there are no rules. It's very common to have that separation, and we have separate A&R meetings. They alternate bi-weekly. So one week we'll have the urban A&R meeting, and the next week it'll be like pop rock A&R meeting, and that's pretty common within the industry. Here, because of the fact that Jive was initially an independent company and not a big company with very clear departments that were separate. It is not unusual for someone, and I'm one of the people, I go to both of those meetings. Peter and Barry go to both of those meetings. It's not impossible at this company for someone to be involved in those different kinds of music, but certainly most A&R people tend to be genre specific, and I think that's partly out of choice, and to be honest, partly out of getting typecast by everyone, by the kind of artists that seek you out, based on what you've done previously, by maybe the people that you work with or other people with the industry who are like, oh yeah, that guy's a rock guy, or that woman is a R&B person, personally, I've always enjoyed doing different kinds of music, and I think there are plenty of people out there who are, you know, Catholic with a small c in their taste in music, and it's more fun to be able to kind of have a big picture. Yeah, well, my path, I was a musician. I actually went to Juilliard when I was a kid. I had some classical training when I was small, too lazy to really pursue it seriously. Um, and went to school and, kind of did academics for a long time. I was a music and English major in college, but, didn't have any concrete plan to be in music. Went to law school kind of by default, didn't know what to do with myself, and decided while in law school that I really wanted to be in the entertainment business. And, I have a passion for music. I also have a passion for movies. I worked at an entertainment law firm after law school. Then I got to be friends with all the people in the music department and at that law firm and managed to get into the music department there. That led to a job in business affairs at Warner Brothers Records, which was my first record company job. And really, I got into A&R because I did a lot of, all my spare time when I wasn't doing contracts during the daytime at the office was spent DJing. I DJed clubs at night. I was a mobile DJ for parties in Hollywood. I started my own little independent record label, and I played with bands. So all my spare time was spent around music, and through that I found some things very early that I turned people on to, and and that led to some people going, "Hey, you know what? Maybe you could be an A&R person." I mean, I had the entree by already being in the business, but through through just my love of music and being involved in things, I gave people the impression that I could actually find things, earlier maybe than other people, and had a good, judgment of talent. And so all of a sudden, from being a lawyer, business affairs person, I got offered a job doing A&R at Geffen Records, and that was my first move into the creative side. Yes, John Kolodner was there when I was at Geffen, yeah. And Kolodner, Zutat, and Gersh, the big three, were all there when I was there. And Kolodner, in fact, gave his okay to my... I was really sponsored by Tom Zutat, but Kolodner gave his okay, even though he really wanted me to stay because I did all the Geffen deals. That's how I got to know those people. I did the Guns N' Roses deal and the Aerosmith deal and so on and so forth. And John loved me being his business affairs person because I did, understand, music and artistry and the artistic kind of temperament. So he would, I think, have been really happier had I just stayed being his own, kind of business affairs person for all his deals. I am certainly, I've been creatively satisfied, in my, with my position. Being a creative executive in the music business has satisfied, my musical passions and aspirations. I knew even going to Juilliard as a child that I was not destined to be a serious classical musician. I don't know whether I had the ability, but I certainly didn't have the discipline and the desire to do that. I really do enjoy helping, both trying to find creative talent and then help artists, to realize whatever it is that they're trying to say, and to be a part of, the music that people are actually listening to, and hopefully loving and appreciating, whatever the audience is for that artist. that's incredibly exciting, very rewarding to me, and I don't feel like, I feel like I am an important part of the process. I don't feel like I'm missing out on any kind of personal satisfaction that I would have gotten as a musician, for example. I feel like I'm part of that, an important part of the whole process. And the whole process is maybe in some ways what interests me the most, not just the making of the music, but then, what you do with it and how you get people to notice it and so forth. I am extremely happy that I've made a career in music. As I mentioned at one point, like anything, nothing is perfect, but I very often still to this day pinch myself and go, I get to do this and I get paid, it's a great, I get to interact with people who I think are much more creative than me, but whom I can actually help in some way. And that's a fantastic way to spend a career. I mean, you get to deal with some of the most, interesting, creative, idiosyncratic people, and yet you still, get to use the rational side of your brain too once in a while. So it's great. I've loved it. Asking what it takes to get signed is it's kind of a big question. Certainly in the simplest terms, and I'm often asked what I look for or what people in my position look for, and as difficult as it is to quantify, and again, because it's a creative endeavor, you don't really know very often what you're looking for until you've come across it. But that being said, I think you can certainly say that, I can say that I look for something that I respond to emotionally on some level. I hope that an artist will, and I look for someone that I think will affect people on some kind of emotional level. It doesn't have to be, necessarily some deep, gut-wrenching kind of emotion or something, but someone that I think will affect people, because that's what, that having an effect on people, I think emotionally, is what, good music does, and gets people invested in something enough to maybe want to go out and buy it, or have a ongoing relationship with the artist and his music. So I look for that, something that I think is going to speak to me emotionally, something that does speak to me emotionally, and or something that I think is going to speak emotionally to a big group of people. I should say I often come across things that I really like, but I need to think that I work at a major record company. As a result of that, I need to generally work with things that are going to have a big audience. So even if it's something I love, if I think it's going to have maybe even a devoted but a small niche type of audience, I'll buy the records or whatever myself. That may not be appropriate. So, honestly, I do look for something that has the ability to connect with a large group of people. Very often that means, a commercial side to the artistry, and, very often hit songs. I used to say that it all boils down to two things that you're looking for, stars and songs. So first time I use the word stars, I look for what I think is, star appeal, star quotient, star quality. Generally want to work with artists who are going to be larger than life in some kind of way. And originality is great. Not always a requisite. Sometimes an artist is not saying something that hasn't been said before. Maybe they're saying it in a little different way. But if you can find something that is original or at least different from the majority of what's out there at any given time, and you think it can reach a huge number of people, then that's the best kind of artist that you're looking for. I don't think they need to be New York or LA or London, certainly not anymore. The internet's changed the game completely right now. And certainly at this moment in time, probably, one of the best ways to get yourself noticed by people like me is by building up a presence on MySpace or Pure Volume. MySpace, I think, being the ultimate example of the day, of the moment. So you don't need to be in New York or LA. Or I think in any kind of music nowadays, the best way to get yourself to get someone in my position to notice you, to hear your music, and then hopefully to sign you, is to have something going on. It's much easier than it's ever been. Making recordings, home recordings, is now become relatively easy and relatively inexpensive. And frankly, I get lots of demos which are basically master quality nowadays. The old days where you used to worry that, there'd be some great artist, but they'd send in some like crappy, horrible, cassette that you couldn't really hear what was going on, and you missed this amazing artist. I mean, that really doesn't happen anymore. So, I think it's very possible to make a high quality, product now for almost anybody, and then you can do something with that product, whether it's, setting up a MySpace page and figuring out how to start attracting people who will then tell other people, and all of a sudden, there's, you've got 25 or 50 or 75,000 friends, you know what I mean, that are, that are having dialogue back and forth with you, or just commenting on your music and what it means to them. Or, it's certainly possible for, and this is something that's been done for a fairly long period of time, an artist, if you're a band, for example, or a singer-songwriter, get out there in front of people and, have built up a following, at least in your hometown or maybe regionally. Dave Matthews had an incredible following, all throughout the Southeast and so on, that was built up before anybody, outside of that area knew who he was. So that, which is more traditional kind of way, building up a touring base. Selling records, whether it's selling them at shows or, selling them again locally through stores, through the internet, getting radio play. Again, a lot of people are making, master quality recordings now and can actually start getting them played, at least locally. So, I mean, I think it's just, kind of so much easier now to make people in my position search you out than it's ever been. So to necessarily want to, I don't really expect to find, artists as nearly as much as I used to through somebody sending me something. Okay, through somebody sending me, just a demo in the mail with a picture. I mean, you still get plenty of them, and some of them I like, and some of them I might want to sign, or at least, take a real look at, want to go out and see them play, or whatever it is. But there's a lot of times now when, one way or another, I'm finding out about something, and I'm going and tracking down the music. And I think that's still the best way, especially now when it's more doable to get something going on your own. And then it's, that also helps in the sense that then, once people start looking at you, you actually have something going on. You have a position of strength to talk to a record company from, because you have accomplished something on your own. Some companies have specific A&R research departments or people who are strictly dedicated to that, whose job is to, go look for the thing that's getting a lot of spins on one or two stations in a town, or, combing MySpace for, whoever's got the most, profile views or friends or whatever. We don't have that kind of really institutionalized. It is a less scientific way, but still, I am on MySpace every day. I usually, get a tip or a hint or something from somebody, to check something out. I'm getting sent links all the time now, which I guess is kind of the new demos, is to just get sent a link to somebody's MySpace page. And then again, I will go on MySpace and check out, at least every week or so, what are the top 10 unsigned things. And you throw out the, the stripper, who's getting 12 million profile views and also says that they're a singer and has, a couple of quote songs on their page, and you get to the artist and you go through it. So I think everybody now, and then I'll hear about something either through a contact in the area or someone else, a lawyer who sussed it out or whatever. I'll hear, oh, by the way, there's this artist. Say it's a rap artist. There's this artist that's selling a ton of stuff out of, mom and pop, indie record stores and, swap meets or whatever, or real stores and scanning records or mixtapes or whatever it is. Again, usually the activity will attract somebody. Somebody will pick up on it. Whether an artist needs a quote record label is partly a function of, what kind of artist and what kind of record label. There are plenty of artists now. I think with the consolidation of major record companies, I think there's, tremendous opportunity for independent labels. And I think a lot of artists, might belong on an independent label, which might be smaller, but, and maybe doesn't have the clout to go break a record nationally at radio, but, which can understand that artist's music, can help to market and promote that artist's music. Again, especially if it's an artist with kind of a niche kind of thing about the music, very often that's the way to go. Most of the time nowadays with bands, it's better for them to be on an independent before they are on a major. And most of the major systems are aligned with certain indie distribution systems, and they tend to make deals with the labels within their own distribution system to have that capability to, it's upstreaming, which is a big word now in the business, to, take an artist started on an independent label and then, pull it up to the major at the appropriate moment in time. That's not just something which is good for major labels, although it is, because it helps to have like almost a farm team for talent, but it's also usually good for the artists because they don't have immediately upon them when they're first starting out that pressure to sell the huge amount of records. They can develop and build up, through touring and, improve their writing and, their performance and everything. So that's a very common method. But I also think there are artists that don't need the record companies who can, the Amy Manns of the world or whatever, they can sell their music on the, through the internet, have their stuff, sold through whatever it is, CD Baby or, And again, I think major record companies, which is where I work, Jive is a major record company, and the other companies I've worked at for the last 15, 16 years, even working for Jive for 8 years when Jive was an independent, it still, was aiming to do the things that a major record company does and is really good at. And that's, breaking records to bigger audiences nationally. It's, being able to work a record nationally at a radio format. It's being able to, work a coordinated, retail sales plan across the country and so on. And that really is, those kinds of things are very hard to do, if not impossible to do, without a major record company. But if that is not, if that's not what the artist wants to do, or if that's not the right thing for the artist's music, they may not need a record company and certainly may not need a major. I think it is very important, although not for every artist, but I think it's extremely helpful to most artists to have, an entrepreneurial sense and, to have both an interest and hopefully even a inclination and skill set for things other than, strictly what goes on in the recording studio. To know how to image themselves, to know how to market themselves, to know, who their audience is and how to reach them. I'll give as an example, there's an artist I'm really interested in right now. Other companies are also really interested in, who's a 17-year-old kid who was in his basement, made recordings in his basement. Now, none of us should even know about this kid. He's from Northern California. He's not LA, New York, or whatever. And what he did was, he's extremely smart and motivated kid. He scammed his way onto the top 10 unsigned artists on Pure Volume. Like literally figured out how to rig the system and get himself onto the top 10. Once he did that, with these songs that he wrote himself and basically produced himself in his bedroom. Once he did that, once he got on the top 10 where people would actually, because, there is a ton of stuff out there. It's like you still have to figure out how to get people to pay attention to it, right? It's great to say, I'm putting up a page on MySpace or whatever, but then, there's a lot of stuff. So he got on the top 10, so people would, people went on there, and then once they started to check out his music, then he got a real reaction. And those people started telling other people, and all of a sudden there was a real community that was into this kid. And then this kid, again, was entrepreneurial enough that if one of those people who would communicate with him through that, through Pure Volume or whatever, sent him a message saying, gee, I'd love for you to play in my town. If the town was within driving distance, he'd make that person like his co-promoter for the show. And he'd tell them, you're going to be my co-promoter. Here's how we do it. Where is there a club that holds, initially, 100 people or whatever he was looking, to do. And have that person, kind of help that person help him to put on a show. This kid didn't even have a band at that time. So he'd just come down on his own, with his guitar and do these shows. This kid is an extreme example of someone who has a very strong entrepreneurial spirit, just like Pete from Fall Out Boy, who has his label now through Fuel by Ramen that has Panic at the Disco as an artist on that label. There are those people who are entrepreneurial and sometimes beyond even themselves as artists. They want to be executives. You have Jay-Z now running Def Jam. It's a new phenomenon, really, that more and more you have artists. It used to be, me artist, you record company. You know what I mean? Those things were not supposed to, we're supposed to be at arm's length. You have, many more artists now, I think, that want to cultivate the entrepreneurial side. And I think it's a good thing, first and foremost for themselves as artists, because, then they don't necessarily have to rely upon other people blindly to do these other things for them. If you can understand something about marketing, you may be able to, it's your music. Hopefully you have a better sense than anybody else of how to market it. Maybe you just don't know what the options are. So, becoming interested and involved enables you to be a participant. That being said, there are artists who don't want to know about any of that, who feel that it will completely get in the way of their creativity and their artistic expression being pure, and that's totally fine too. And is completely fine if that's what that artist believes in. But it's interesting to see, for me as someone who's been doing it for a while, to see the entrepreneurial instinct to become become more acceptable as well as more popular. Again, certainly the hip hop world has been a part of that happening. I think many artists in the hip hop world are unashamedly interested about, making money and being entrepreneurial to make more money. And, that's one of the ways that I think that the business has changed from maybe, 10, 12 years ago, when it was much more common for artists to want to have creative control, but not that concerned about anything else. I think it probably is more important for an artist to understand the business because maybe they can help us to understand it, since it's become really hard for us supposed experts to understand it. Clearly, it's a time when, rules are changing and, what people want seems to be changing, and how they want to get it seems to be changing. So I think, for an artist to help, control their own destiny, it's probably important for them to know something about, as much as possible about the same issues that everybody's grappling with. Whether it's is the album going to remain, the form in which people, want to, invest in music? Is, what are people going to be listening to music on? It's one thing I realize is that, when I was younger, people who were really into music, there was an extremely high premium on, the quality of your equipment. It's like people who were really into music were, they wanted to have high-end stuff, and they knew all about, you'd have some people who got, in a way that I couldn't even begin to fathom, into, the niceties of, of sound quality. I think now it's like, more and more you're going to have, people listening to their music, on cell phones, through computers, which may or may not be hooked up to an external sound system or external speakers. In other words, I think that everything's kind of up for grabs right now, and to the extent that an artist is not just making music for themselves, but for an audience, I think it's very important that they try to understand what's going on. I have ideas about the album versus songs. I think that, and certainly my ideas are just kind of my conjecture at this moment. I don't have any, I don't think, any special knowledge or insight. But my feeling is that certainly people are becoming less attached to the idea of an album. Uh, you know, uh, a friend of mine was telling me yesterday that his daughter, he had to kind of sit his daughter down and show his daughter how to burn, songs from CDs that they already owned, that the family owned, onto the computer, because she was spending, $150 a month downloading individual songs, from iTunes at 99 cents a pop. And he was like, a lot of these songs we already have. It's just, she's so into that mode and so easy to just keep going back to iTunes and buying what she wants. Well, she's buying individual songs. She's not buying albums. I think that, some artists have started to, take the approach that, they're going into the studio regularly. They might come out with, 2 or 3 songs at any given time. Immediately post out those songs or make those songs available, to stream, or make them available to buy. I think that my guess is that the album will probably change or not become the key thing, just because I think people will start wanting to get music from the artists they're into in real time. You know what I mean? As the music is created. That seems to be the way that we're going with technology, is to kind of compress, the space and time between, creation and delivery to the consumer, and I think that, the idea of making an album and getting it finished and then waiting months and all of that, it seems to me like that's got to become obsolete at some point in time. And I think it's exciting to think that, as much as I love the album, and part of me hopes that doesn't happen, because the best albums, which were actually a body of work, something that was a coherent whole, those are the most important musical things in my life, were those albums that I loved and related to, more so than the individual songs or the hit songs on those albums. Although I love hit songs. I just think it's exciting that people will be able to have that kind of more immediate relationship with the artists and the music. The selling of super high quality CDs of live shows, that you can buy right after the experience of being at the show. All those kinds of things are exciting, and maybe that is what the future is supposed to be. Is just, we seem to be moving, again, I think if there's a trend that I see overall in media and entertainment, it's that we're moving to a world of customized, on-demand, consumerism. We want to be able to decide what we want, and get it when we want. And that's, I think, the way. I mean, I know when I was a kid, I always dreamed of having my own radio station. That was my thing. It's like, if I could, when I was old enough to be thinking about driving in a car, I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could somehow, go on an intercom, to my own radio station and say, hey, I'm driving, I feel like hearing these 5 songs now. Well, now you can do that. So I tend to think that's the way we're going.